Welcome to the Eversio Experience podcast. I'm Brandi Garden, and I am here with my co-host Desiree Caruso, Doctor of Naturopathic Medicine. And today, we just want you to know how proud we are of you for tuning in to learn about your health and your wellness. We have a very exciting topic to discuss with you today, and I promise you, you either are experiencing an issue with this or you know someone who is, and what we're going to share today is something that you can incorporate right away. Such a simple thing to change something in your life, something in your health that is going to make you feel so much better. But before we get to that, I just wanted to make a comment about something that happened recently at an event that I was at. So I was at a big event. There were probably over 1,000 people at this event, and a beautiful woman approached me. She was wearing a gorgeous green dress. She just had this glow and beautiful energy. And she came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hello, you don't know who I am, but I take your products and I listen to your podcast and I love it." And it's the first time that that's happened out in public. And it just warmed my heart so much. And it turned out that this woman lives in my community and actually is a grade 5 teacher. And you might know that I also was a grade 5 teacher for a couple of decades. And the synchronicities were amazing as we chatted about mushrooms and about the kingdom fungi and about education and about how we need those things to come together. And she asked me if I would, in the upcoming school year, help her with a field trip for her grade 5 class to take them out into nature and to do a mushroom walk and just talk about fungi together. And oh my gosh, yes, of course. So if you're listening, you know who you are. Thank you so much for being brave enough to come up and tap me on the shoulder that evening. It truly made my whole night, my whole week, maybe my whole year, to know that there are real people out there listening to us, Dr. Des. And it just makes me so glad that we are making fungi part of the conversation. And if it can get into the conversation around education and we can get those grade 5 students excited about it, we're going to change the world. So enough about that. Today, what we're going to talk about, I don't know, Dr. Des, should we just go with our gut?
Yes.
We're going to talk about gut health and mushrooms, and really just gut health overall. So gut health issues are on the rise. That's the truth. The gut is having a moment, not a moment for reasons we would like for it to be having. And according to recent research, 2/3 of people are experiencing gut health issues in North America right now. And the group of people, they say the age group, 18 to 44-year-olds, that's experiencing the most issues is what is such a surprise in the research. And when we look at why are people having gut health issues in this really young age group, that was surprising to me when I read it. It's because of the way that we're eating. It's the way that we're introducing food into the gut. People are eating on the go far more often. I know we're a busy family. I know that for us, sometimes we're off to dance class, we're off to whatever activity we're doing, and it's not easy to get sitting down at a dinner table and eating as a family as often as we would like. Ultra processed foods are everywhere, marketing and packaging these foods that are easy to grab and go. And in order to keep them shelf stable and in order to keep them attractive, the lists of ingredients are getting longer and longer and longer, and trying to educate our kids about how to read through that list and identify the things that are not food and are not going to be helpful to our gut is a tough thing. Gone are the days when grabbing an apple is the cool thing to do, but we're going to bring it back. And maybe we're going to also grab some beautifully sauteed mushrooms along with that. A lot of stress. We know that chronic stress is, we talk about it all the time here on the podcast and at Eversio HQ. Stress is something that needs to be managed today. It's not a given that we are raised knowing how to manage stress, but stress is here. Traffic is here. Bills and taxes are here. Mental health issues are here. And this stress in our life is something that's not helping our gut. And I'm not going to shy away from also saying that alcohol probably is what's affecting this age group. We know that 18 to 44-year-olds, when we're 18 and we're first introduced to this, now it's legal and we can consume alcohol. It's 19 here where we live in Canada, 21 in the United States, it's 18 in some provinces. This is a young age for people to be introducing alcohol to the system. Now, I'm not saying don't drink alcohol. I don't personally. I'm not somebody that consumes alcohol on any type of a regular basis, but I might have a glass of champagne at New Year's. And the reason is because I know it was something that was affecting my gut. It was something that was related to some of the symptoms I was experiencing that I did not want. So I've chosen to eliminate because of the way it makes me feel. Now, that's not the case for everyone. Some people can have whatever they want, and it doesn't affect them that way. But when we look at this age group and we look at the gut health issues and we look at 2/3 of them experiencing something, and that this is also the group of people known most for having alcohol as part of their regular experience, could there be some correlation? And of course, that shows up in the research. So today, we're going to talk to you about bloating, something many of my girlfriends talk to me about almost every day. My hairdresser spoke to me about it the last time I got my hair cut. She said, "Don't worry, I'm not pregnant. I'm just bloated." And I thought, how did we get here where we have to say that? We're going to talk about gas that's often related to that bloating. We'll get down into talking about ulcers, and Dr. Des has some cool research to share with you about that. Constipation, often the beginning of the problem related to dysbiosis. We'll get into IBD and colitis and what some people just describe as indigestion. It's just this dysbiosis of the gut. Something's not right. Either there's pain or there is activity or there is something that's not making us happy, and really try to get to understanding how the gut works so that we can clear our minds, we can have a stronger immune system, and we can feel like we can do the things we want to get doing in our lives. Do you know that 40% of people said that they had a GI, a gastrointestinal issue, so uncomfortable that it stopped them from exercising, which we know is non-negotiable, stopped them from running their basic errands in their day-to-day life so that they could just have a life, or from getting to work so that they could be connected to their purpose or their passion. 40% of people said that a gut health issue stopped them from doing the things that make them them.
Wow.
We can't have this anymore. And we know it's such a simple thing to fix. So as I have a sip of my green smoothie, a little foreshadowing, let's jump in. So Dr. Des, I love Hippocrates, and this is an ancient Greek physician who is nearly 2,500 years ago that this amazing human was on our planet. And I quote him so often, let food be thy medicine, and all these quotes. But today, I want to remind you that he is the person who said all disease begins in the gut. So I think he was not far off when he said that. Every time we eat or we drink something, we're exposing ourselves to chemicals or hormones, and we're either feeding a disease or we're fighting it. And today, Dr. Des is going to help you know how you can fight it. So of course, we're going to talk about mushrooms. If if I could just say two things, meditation and mushrooms, let's just do those two things, I would. But we're not going to talk about meditation today. We're going to really focus on how those mushrooms can get inside of us and what the heck is happening in there. So, Dr. Des, give us the how and why. How is it that mushrooms can be so beneficial for the gut? Why are they able to get in there and do this great work? Take it away and share some research with us.
Absolutely. And something I want to say before we get into it too is that, oftentimes our gut health and what we are consuming into our body is overlooked, right? We think, oh, I don't feel so good, but maybe we didn't eat very well. We're not nourishing our bodies. And so this is where functional mushrooms come in, where we are nourishing our gastrointestinal system. So all functional mushrooms contain polysaccharides or beta-D-glucans, especially if it's an extract, which, as you know, our products are extracts from the fruiting bodies of all the mushrooms that we work with. And the reason this is important is because these fungal beta-D-glucans, they are able to feed the microbiome for healthy bacteria so that we have a good, healthy landscape. In a previous episode, Brandi and I mentioned that there are different types of beta-glucans. There are cereal beta-glucans. There are fungal beta-glucans. And so the research that we're talking about today, of course, is going to be for fungal beta-glucans because that's from mushrooms. And so that's why it's extremely important. So let's get into fungal polysaccharides and how they are actually improving the gut microbiome. You've probably heard us say before that polysaccharides and fungal beta-glucans act as a prebiotic. So just for those who are listening and unsure, like, well, I've heard the term probiotic before, but I haven't heard the term prebiotic. So probiotic is essentially you're consuming good bacterial strains to populate the gut. A prebiotic is essentially food for the bacterial species in your gut, notably the beneficial bacterial species. And when we say beneficial bacterial species, how do we know it's these particular strains are beneficial? And it's because through the research, they have elucidated that particular strains are associated with a more healthy profile of gut symptoms and overall health. And so they've really examined that. We're going to talk about two particular strains with respect to a healthy microbiome and with respect to mushrooms and how they're connected, because that's really important. So let's go into the studies of fungal polysaccharides. So we'll start off with one. It was a rat study where they found that polysaccharides, specifically from reishi, and we'll go into, particular mushrooms later, but let's get that overall important information. So these reishi polysaccharides were able to regulate the intestinal microbiome by acting as a prebiotic and reducing levels of pathogenic bacteria. And so the study was really aiming to investigate whether reishi polysaccharides would improve colitis in rats by regulating the gut microbiome and altering colonic epithelial expression, because they have identified in research that those with inflammatory bowel conditions or even dysbiosis, they have a level of dysbiosis where there is an increase in particular bacterial strains that are associated with more unfavorable symptoms.
When you say the word dysbiosis, because I think this word gets
Mm,
said a lot,
yeah.
I imagine that is just, I think of it as imbalance. Am I correct in that just means an imbalance of the good bacteria and the not so great bacteria in the gut? Is that what you mean when you say dysbiosis?
Yeah, so yes. So when we say dysbiosis, we mean there is an imbalance where there isn't enough of the beneficial bacterial strains. So there is that, the teeter-totter is kind of maybe lopsided to one where unfavorable strains are more present. And we want to bring that into homeostasis and bring that more balance so that there isn't that dysbiosis. Yeah, so that's a
Okay.
great question. And so with this particular study and the results, they found that the polysaccharides significantly lowered disease activity scored by a particular index in the study by producing more short chain fatty acids and increasing short chain fatty acid producing bacteria in the small intestine and the cecum of rats. This resulted in a regulation of 11 genes, and 5 of these genes were down regulated genes that were enriched in inflammation mediated pathways. So we've heard the term short chain fatty acids before. And short chain fatty acids essentially are they are the byproducts of the enzymatic reactions from beneficial bacteria. So we feed our gut prebiotics, so beta glucans, which, fungal beta glucans, they're a soluble fiber. They're a vital component of prebiotic sources. What are the benefits? It's stimulating and balancing the immune system because of the immune cells that are in our gastrointestinal system. And for gut health in particular, it's improving gut integrity, it's improving the energy harvest, it's protecting our gut, also known as the host, against harmful pathogens. And so these short chain fatty acids, which are the metabolites from polysaccharides that are obtained from these enzymatic reactions in the gut microbiome, they play important roles in gene expression, proliferation, and all of these sort of pathways and differentiation of cells. And researchers have thought, okay, well, what is it about fungal beta glucans that are really beneficial for the gut? We know it's great as a prebiotic, but they've thought that it's the physical properties such as the water solubility from polysaccharides, the viscosity and the gelation of beta glucans that have made it a really valuable component in the field of nutrition and food science, in more recent years with research. So let's talk about reishi a little bit, how it's acting on the gut microbiome. So they haven't identified the exact action on it. And we've talked about before that not all of the exact mechanism of actions have been elucidated, but they have been able to identify changes in research. And these health benefits with reishi shows that it can activate these mitochondrial related pathways and the immune system. So we know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So it's responsible for energy production. So when it's helping to feed that energy production system, our cells have a better cellular health, so to speak. And so reishi polysaccharides have stimulated the maturation of these particular cells called monocyte-derived dendritic cells. These particular cells play a role in innate and adaptive immunity. So these two different types of immune systems that we've talked about before, and they are involved in inflammation and infection. So that's good in that sense where it's helping the gastrointestinal system to modulate any sort of pathogens and to help keep everything in balance. Maitake. So the action on the gut microbiome from the maitake perspective is that butyrate is produced. It's a byproduct of consuming maitake polysaccharides. It's converted into short chain fatty acids. Butyrate is a type of short chain fatty acid, and it has this protective function, such as differentiation and regulation of the mucosal gene expression in the gastrointestinal system. And so they found that the growth of lactobacilli and bifidobacterium, so these two particular strains, are supported by beta glucans, and they found that in both in vivo and in vitro studies. So both living organisms as well as in petri dishes for those studies, which is important. So these short chain fatty acids, they have this anti-inflammatory effect that's exerted by the butyrate by affecting the migration and adhesion of immune cells and the expression of cytokines, which are these, cells of the immune system that are alerting. They're little alerts and signals that are going through the body, having downstream effects. And they found to be inhibiting particular cellular processes, and so that it's not going down pathways that are, not beneficial for the cell in terms of a health perspective.
So interesting that we talk about mushrooms for immune health so often, and we just think about the mushroom and it's directly affecting the immune system, or these these little, I think of it as like a cascade effect or a domino effect of this immune cell then talking to this immune cell, but we've never gone backwards and talked about what was the key that came in the beginning. And this gut immune connection is so interesting what you're saying, like these gut microbiomes, like the air traffic control for the immune system, surveying what's coming in, so we're eating food and it's getting down into the gut, and then from the mouth communicating to the immune system cells something isn't right here, and we're getting this system working with a whole other system. And we've always known mushrooms are working on all of the systems of the body, but here's this great example of how we see what we think of as a digestive system and eating, and then those microbes in our gut, this community down here in the second brain, knocking on the door of this lining you're talking about and telling the immune cells, hey, there's something going on here, something's not quite right. I love it. Keep going.
Mhm, mhm. And so, we often think, okay, so beta glucans, these fungal beta glucans and polysaccharides and particular molecules, they are acting as a prebiotic to help healthy microbiome and healthy bacterial species to grow, but whereabouts in the gastrointestinal tract? And the beta glucans are the polysaccharides that undergo fermentation in the cecum and the colon, so the large intestine, and it's by the microbiome. And this helps to increase beneficial bacteria in the microflora. So, this short chain fatty acid production is the fermentation product of beta glucans by the intestinal and colonic bacteria. So there was this one study where they examined healthy participants and they had them consume fungal beta glucans for 8 to 12 weeks, so 2 to 3 months. And they found that the consumption of beta glucans for this period of time increased butyrate concentration in the feces. So short chain fatty acid production, aka butyrate, it is a short chain fatty acid. They found that it's important in these studies because it's able to help with the regeneration of epithelial cells in the intestine. It's helping to keep those cells healthy. And this is implicated in research for colorectal cancer and things like that, where it's able to go to the colon and actually impart a beneficial microflora there as well. So some of the functions of short chain fatty acids, it's regulating that mucosal gene expression. It's helping with differentiation of cells, so immune cells and things like that to monitor the area. It's lowering the colonic pH, which helps to inhibit pathogens and things that are unwanted in that area. And it's helping to improve the growth of beneficial bacterial species like bifidobacterium and lactobacilli, because these particular strains have been associated with a healthy microbiome and symptom eradication and just a better gut health picture in studies. And butyrate, as we know, the short chain fatty acid, it acts as food for intestinal epithelial cells. There's this one review paper that I was reading, and they talk about neoplastic cells, which are cancerous cells, and they were mentioning how these cells prefer glucose over butyrate for food energy sources, which we know. And so they were suggesting that this may be a possible link for why butyrate may be anti-neoplastic, because it's not feeding those cells. It's feeding the
Interesting.
healthy bacterial species that are making it an unfavorable environment for
Or
these other cells that are not native to us. So 95% of butyrate is absorbed by colonocytes, so cells in the colon, where it serves as the dominant energy source via particular pathways like beta oxidation and the TCA cycle. And so small intestinal enterocytes can also absorb butyrate, these short chain fatty acids, but these cells primarily service energy from glucose and glutamate. You know, we've heard of glutamate, people taking glutamate supplements to help support an intestinal lining there. But when absorbed, these short chain fatty acids travel via the portal circulation to the liver, because we know that we have a particular circulation system that goes from the digestive system, and it takes nutrients to the liver. So this is where toxins as well as nutrients go from the digestive system to the liver, because we know our liver is our inner detoxification system. And that's where they're metabolized for energy, or they serve as a substrate for longer chain fatty acids. And it's suggested that these fungal beta glucans, they increase lactobacilli and bifidobacterium in the gastrointestinal system because of this increase in short chain fatty acids like butyrate, which actually increases the production of GABA, which is a neurotransmitter. So we know that gut brain axis, which may potentially lower the risk of Alzheimer's, because they found that a reduction in the levels of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium results in decreased levels of GABA. And they found that frontal, temporal, and the parietal cortex of Alzheimer's disease patients show a reduction in GABA. So there's this relationship between the regulation of this bacterial population by these beta glucans that may play a significant role in the prevention of Alzheimer's. So I know we're talking about gut health here, but this is a great example of how all of our systems are not separate,
Mhm.
right? A lot of autoimmune conditions or particular disease states, they're all working together. And so the fact that a healthy microbiome is impacting our brain and other systems, it just gives you more reason to value the importance of a healthy microbiome. You and I, Brandi, have talked about how fascinated we are with brain health and the prevention of
Mhm.
Alzheimer's, and our personal stories to the connection of brain health and preserving that and preventing other things, but the gut microbiome in
Absolutely.
the brain.
Absolutely. And I think we both know too that, I mean, we've changed the way that we eat for various reasons over time, trying eliminating different things or adding different things. And I think that we can both say that we have felt our brains become sharper, and we have felt our skin become clearer, and we have felt the difference when we include more instead of excluding more.
Mhm.
And I mean, we have really upped our game with, I mean, tell us what you put in your green smoothie in a day, Dr. Des. Go for it.
Yeah, my green smoothie, I mean, sometimes it'll vary in terms of changing up what I'm putting in there, but I love to throw in some celery, I'll put in some ginger, I'll do leafy greens, like usually kale or Swiss chard I'll put in there. I love to put in a little bit of green apple. I, of course, put my mushrooms in there. So I actually right now I'm going through both the 3 mushroom blend in there as well as the 6 mushroom blend, because I love the antioxidants, but then I love the energy and everything else from the
Yeah.
3 mushroom blend. I'm putting in some protein powder. For me, it's a vegan protein powder. I am throwing in some creatine in there. I put a little pinch of sea salt, sometimes a little bit of cinnamon if I like,
And
and then
that's
I'll
your
put
medicine.
and some strawberries. And that's my medicine. I'm giving my gut some fiber.
Yes.
It differs in terms of all of the things that I'm putting in, and I'll switch it up, and maybe I'll put in some frozen blueberries and things like that just to change it up. But
Yeah.
yeah, you got to feed
And
feed the bacteria.
you got to feed them. We have this whole community. And when I looked at the numbers, a brand ambassador that we work with, a lovely woman from right here in Squamish, tells us that we have 38 trillion bacteria. And these are bacteria that aren't just in our gut, right? We have a skin microbiome, we have a vaginal microbiome, we have a mouth microbiome, and then we have the gut microbiome. So we're talking about the gut microbiome today, but feeding these good bacteria that you're talking about, giving them what they want to eat is going to affect all of these systems of our body. And I mean, we feel it happening when we do it. The more we feed them, the happier they are, and the more of them there are. And they all do different things for us. So you said something you're talking about there about feeding native bacteria. And so many people are spending so much money on these expensive probiotics. And I think what I hear you saying is you don't need to put a probiotic in your body. You can support the native good bacteria that you have by feeding them. And we're going to feed them a prebiotic, and a prebiotic is just food for the good bacteria in your gut. And what is the food they want to eat? They they want to eat more plants. They want to eat more fungi. They want to eat the things that are going to make them strong and healthy, and that's what it is. So we're not saying don't eat the things we haven't said, meat. Don't don't eat.
Mhm.
We're not saying don't eat those things, but those things are not helping to grow a healthy microbiome. It is more plants, people. And when there was a study done, I have to find the name of it, but it was essentially a study of what is going to impact the microbiome the most. And they studied tens of thousands of people from across the world. And in the end, it was just the diversity. It wasn't, how much celery you eat in a day or how much spinach you eat in a day or how many apples, but it was the number of different plants and fungi you ate in a day. And they were recommending up to 30 different plants and fungi over the course of the week had the best outcomes for people with their gut. And then that was affecting the symptoms that they were having, autoimmune conditions, all of this inflammation, all of these other brain health issues were being affected when we just upped the diversity of what we were putting in. And I think mushrooms get left out of that picture so much. We hear people saying, include more plants, include more plants. And when I say plants, I mean whole grains, I mean herbs, I mean fruits, I mean vegetables, I mean nuts and seeds. These are all plants. They're all growing from the earth. But we forget to say fungi. And Des, when you're talking about how our body needs to have these short chain fatty acids to help us with that lining of the gut, to help close up these junctions that are the reason we have leaky gut. And that leaky gut leading to things seeping into our bloodstream that shouldn't be there. And when they're in our bloodstream, our immune system gets upset and we have autoimmune conditions. Those short chain fatty acids are like gold. We want to build them up. We want to support them. We want to help our body be able to create them. And we see that these compounds in mushrooms, fungal beta glucans, are a big part of the picture that often gets left out. So enough of my rant about eat more plants and fungi,
But
but
it's true, and people will say, "What type of diet do you eat?" And especially in the
yeah,
naturopathic medical community, this is something that is talked about a lot. I mean, it's a big emphasis in the medicine, and when you say plant-based, people almost have this little reaction
yeah,
like, "Oh, I have to
there's
be
a stigma.
vegetarian." There's a stigma. I will share my own personal diet. When I say I'm plant-based, I'm eating majority of plants, no matter whether you eat meat, you don't eat meat, you eat fish, you don't eat fish, you eat eggs, you eat dairy, you eat all these things, whatever, it doesn't matter. But the basis and the foundation has to be whole foods, and you have to be eating more plants. I do eat meat, but majority of my diet is plants. And
Hmm.
when you talk about this diversity in the plants and all the things, the whole foods that you are consuming, that diversity is important for your gut to be able to feed and to be able to have that flexibility, right? That flexibility, because if you're able to tolerate a wide variety of diversity and different types of plants, then you're becoming more flexible with the foods that you consume, right? It's it's not optimal for you to be restricted by so
Mm,
many particular things. When
yes.
it's that can be a big topic as well, but it's that inflammation and it's modulating the microbiome. Brandi, you talk about mushrooms as food, and I think I come at it from the lens of mushrooms are supplements or mushroom extracts or
Yeah.
supplements, because the lens that I'm looking at it through is how it can impact particular health benefits because of the research, and I'm looking into that. But I also do see mushrooms as food because of how we are incorporating them into our lifestyle. We talk about putting in a smoothie. Well, that's food, that's
Hmm.
nourishment. You could also call that medicine as well. And beta glucans, these medicinal compounds from the fruiting bodies of functional mushrooms, are categorized as dietary fibers because they escape digestion from these human gastric enzymes and they reach the large intestine undigested. That's where they undergo fermentation by the gut microbiome. And we know that fungal beta glucans, and when we say that, it's because of the specific bonds. So they specifically have beta 1316 bonds that induces alterations in the composition of the gut. And we've talked about before how there are particular compounds that are specific and unique to particular mushrooms. So, for example, with
Yes.
turkey tail and PSP, the difference really is just in the amount of these particular bonds and the location and all of these things. There was this human study on turkey tail, and turkey tail is one of those functional mushrooms. We've talked about it with respect to the immune system a lot, just because in Asia of
Hmm.
the wide variety of research, extensive research on turkey tail in that sense. But when we think of turkey tail, it's one of the main players for gut health, and we know that our immune system is in our gut as well because of the different layers of cells. And this particular study found that PSP, which is a specific polysaccharide, it's called polysaccharide peptide, it acts as a prebiotic to modulate human intestinal microbiome composition. There was another in vitro study that examined PSP and found that it modified human fecal microbiome composition by increasing populations of, again, these species, these bacterial strains, bifidobacterium species and lactobacillus species, and it was found to reduce clostridium species and that population, and it helped to decrease the culture pH again. So having an environment that's non-optimal for pathogens and from these other invaders where we don't want a higher population. There was this
So
mice
cool.
study looking at lion's mane polysaccharides. We've talked about lion's mane. We've really talked about it for the brain. We know
Yeah.
that there's this brain gut connection. This mice study was looking and found that lion's mane polysaccharides were able to regulate the gut microbiome and help to treat dysbiosis, which is this imbalance of gut bacteria that's not optimal for people where they experience these symptoms. They found that it was because these lion's mane polysaccharides elevated levels of favorable bacterial species and decrease pathogenic ones. They also suggested that lion's mane may act similarly to non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs called COX-2
Mm.
inhibitors. They found that this treatment group expressed decreased levels and expression of pro-inflammatory markers in the body, which makes sense because we've heard from our community and we've read in the research how people who are taking lion's mane have found that their gut health is also improved too. They're taking it for brain health, but they're taking
Mm.
lion's mane and they're thinking, "Oh, my bowel habits have maybe changed slightly for a couple days to regulate itself, and now my gut health is much better. What's up with that? I thought this was for the brain." Well, it's because these polysaccharides are acting as this prebiotic and they're helping to modulate inflammation in the gut. Think about if you're inflamed. Think about conditions like eczema or even autoimmune conditions. We have these tight junctions in our gut where it's preventing, if you think of like a screen, it's preventing things from going through and being absorbed. Whereas with these tight junctions with inflammation, right, there becomes spaces between them. Things can get absorbed into our system and wreak havoc, and maybe we feel more inflamed. Maybe if you've been
Hmm.
consuming a lot of alcohol, like you mentioned earlier when we were chatting, that may cause some inflammation. So it's just all of these things that have this interplay together.
I want to say too, well, two things. 100% turkey tail, I think of for the immune system. Lion's mane, I think of for the brain. And then we think about the word side effects and how it has such a negative connotation in society. Oh, I'm having a side effect. But these are the good side effects. To take something for one reason, you're going to take lion's mane capsules because you want prevention of neurodegenerative diseases or whatever you're taking it for. If you're just taking it for productivity and focus, to have the gut health, I mean, that was me. As you all know, lion's mane was my first love. I didn't even know I had leaky gut. I had actually ever even heard of a leaky gut, but I definitely took a ton of antibiotics as a kid. I had strep throat all the time as a kid. We know my diet was not great, even though I had a very health conscious mom who was doing her best at the time. I grew up in the 80s and 90s when ultra processed foods were becoming the greatest thing ever. And I often slag mini wheats, poor mini wheats, but I had a love for mini wheats like you would not believe, with a ton of real whole dairy cow's milk on it. And I'm someone that doesn't do well with lactose today, and I don't do well with sugar. And there was like sugar on wheat with dairy and antibiotics on the side. Like, yeah, I had leaky gut and I developed an autoimmune condition. Was it partly related to that? Very likely. When I started taking mushrooms, I was taking it because I'd had side effects from pharmaceuticals. I was looking after my brain. I was looking for neurogenesis, but I for sure healed my gut in the process without knowing it. As COVID hit and so many people were starting to include turkey tail because they wanted daily immune support, they wanted to just be extra cautious. These people also started to say, and we have these reviews on the website, something I didn't expect is my gut just feels great. And now you're explaining to us why. So I love that we're getting these great, good side effects when we're taking something. The other thing is you're talking about PSP, polysaccharide peptide. And if there are people listening that are in the mushroom or mushroom wellness community, you may see PSK showing up in similar research about turkey tail for gut health. And that stands for polysaccharide crestin. And we often will get the question, we've had a few emails in the last months. We report PSP, we can test for it. We test for it at a lab in California. We have a very high percentage of PSP. I think we're upwards of 15% now in our turkey tail product. And we're putting that on the label so that you know you're getting that medicine in that product. And we are getting PSP where others are getting PSK that work similarly because of the strain of turkey tail we're working with. So some strains of turkey tail mushroom will produce polysaccharide peptide, where others will produce polysaccharide crestin, often determined by the part of the world the turkey tail is being grown in. You know that we harvest our turkey tail from nature. We're harvesting it from wood. It's not being grown on grain. It's not being grown in a lab. So it's the part of the world that we're harvesting, and the type of wood that our turkey tail is being grown on is why we are getting PSP and high levels of it there. So that medicine Dr. Desiree is talking about is built by Mother Nature. It is coming from the wood that the turkey tail mushrooms are grown on and then being delivered to us for our happy, healthy guts. I love it so much. Okay, Dr. Des, do you want to move along and talk about so we're talking about microbiome, and this is just your general, I mean, people that are suffering with constipation, get your microbiome under control, you're going to have some relief. People that are suffering from gas and bloating and general indigestion, this is the answer. This is the answer for you. But what about people that are experiencing more inflammation-based things? So we talk about IBD and colitis and these type of things. Are there mushrooms that are going to affect different pathways that might be effective on that inflammation piece?
Yeah, there definitely are. So we've talked about so far bloating and indigestion and this dysbiosis and microbiome. So because of all the functional mushrooms that we're working with our extracts, you're getting that support. And then from there, particular functional mushrooms have these secondary benefits where there is more research on supporting gut health. We talked about turkey tail, reishi, lion's mane. There's one that we haven't yet talked about with particular research on the inflammatory aspect of gut health. So there are some conditions that are more common that people will reach out to us about, looking to see if functional mushrooms can help to support them. And oftentimes this is with this inflammation piece, like you mentioned, Brandi, one of them being inflammatory bowel disease. So inflammatory bowel disease means ulcerative colitis. It means Crohn's disease. Is there a functional mushroom to help with that? So there's one particular mushroom that has quite a bit of research on it, and this is chaga. So there was one mice study that examined chaga extract and looked at how it could impact these mice who had colitis and experienced these particular symptoms of colitis. They found that chaga was able to decrease TNF alpha expression in mice with colitis. We know that TNF alpha is a pro-inflammatory cytokine, and if this kind of sounds familiar to you, it's because Brandi talked about it before with psoriatic arthritis, having
Yeah.
that excess TNF alpha. So particular autoimmune conditions have these particular patterns where certain markers or immune cells are elevated at levels that are not optimal for our body. And so in this mice study, they found that it was able to decrease this expression. Well, why is that important? We know it's a pro-inflammatory cytokine, but it's because TNF alpha concentrations have been found to be elevated in patients who are diagnosed with irritable bowel disease, so colitis, ulcerative colitis, Crohn's disease. And they've also found it in the stools of irritable bowel disease patients. So the fact that it can help to modulate this inflammation in the colon is beneficial, because oftentimes when those who have irritable bowel disease have a flare, it's that inflammation, that bucket is overflowing. There's too much inflammation, and it can lead to downstream effects, and unfavorable and uncomfortable symptoms as well. There was this other mice study that examined chaga extract and found that it alleviated chronic intestinal inflammation. And it was able to do that and reduced the disease activity index. So this particular index, how they measured and monitored the inflammation, and they found that it alleviated the pathological changes in colitis, so these cellular changes, where these tight junction proteins such as occludin and ZO1 were lost in colon tissue, so they were reduced.
Mm.
So the tight junction proteins, they were found that they were decreased in colon tissues, and it was able to alleviate some of these pathological changes. And they also found that chaga extract was able to help regulate this imbalance of particular immune cells, so regulate the balance of Th1 and Th2 cells, and then Th17 and Th regulatory cells. And there are particular patterns for an imbalance of these cells for particular immune conditions. So they found that it was able to regulate that in colon tissues, in mesenteric lymph nodes, and as well as the spleen. So when we think of these conditions like irritable bowel disease, we are thinking of chaga, just because not only is it acting as a prebiotic and helping the microbiome, like we've talked about before, helping you be regular with soluble fiber, feeding those colon cells, but then also mitigating inflammation that's particular to those conditions.
It's so interesting that we work with Health Canada quite closely, and the construction of our labels and what we're allowed to say, what we're not allowed to say actually on the label is
Mhm,
makes it difficult for people, because you're not going to pick up a jar of chaga extract capsules and it's not going to say this can help you with things like
mhm,
IBD and what have you. It's not going to say decreases TNF alpha. We aren't allowed to say that. But what we are
mhm.
allowed to say is that these are immunomodulators. They have
Yeah,
immunomodulating properties. And unfortunately, that word doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people, but you just explained it beautifully. It is modulating, balancing, bringing these immune cells that
yeah.
when they're in balance, we have enough of them, they're able to just, we don't have to think about being well. Our body just knows exactly what to do. And they have gone out of balance for some reason. So often it's a lifestyle factor to bring them back in balance, but mushrooms are there to help with that, to give you that leg up so that you can bring those immune cells back into balance. That's modulating them. We're not increasing them, we're not decreasing them. We are getting them where they're supposed to be in the first place. That's the mushroom intelligence that we're not allowed to talk about, but that's what that word means. So, and you talk about all these different immune cells, and I realize, there are so many of them. We can't know about all of them. That's why we have you to dig them out of. This research actually found that immune cell was being acted on by the molecule in this mushroom. That's when it really that word starts to hit home for me. Immunomodulating. Yeah, just do
Mhm.
that, mushrooms. I'm going to put them inside of me, and you just do that. Get my immune system functioning how it's supposed to without being underactive or overactive. I love it. All right.
Mhm.
What mushroom haven't you talked about? We talk about reishi with inflammation sometimes. Is there anything interesting about reishi with inflammation in the gut?
Yeah, so reishi polysaccharides have found to, and I mentioned this before, where they've helped to stimulate the maturation of monocyte-derived dendritic cells, which play a role in the innate and adaptive immunity involved in inflammation and in infection. Reishi also has research as well and it's been shown to help modulate these T cells. Again, so similarly to with chaga, they haven't examined, from my knowledge, reishi in particular to things like irritable bowel disease like chaga and made that link and made that connection. But with other conditions where there's that imbalance of cells that unfavorable, they found that reishi is able to help modulate that. So things like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, hyperthyroidism. Reishi is one of those mushrooms where it's able to help balance that out so that those thyroid symptoms are not as uncomfortable and they're not interfering with your symptoms and interfering with your daily life. So reishi definitely to help modulate the inflammatory cells, so those Th1, Th2, and then Th17 and T regulatory cells. We see this with hay fever and allergies and
Mm.
histamine and things like that. So reishi again able to help with that modulation of these inflammatory cells.
Yeah, and I mean, to bring up allergies, food sensitivities, again, it's the gut, and so many people get relief from allergies when they heal that leaky gut, because the reason they had the allergy in the first place is because something got into the bloodstream that wasn't supposed to be there. Again, those tight junctions being opened up and allowing things through that shouldn't get through. So if we could just heal the leaky junctions, if we could just tighten things back up and get that gut healed, think about healing as having this healthy lining. And that's what the prebiotic part of the mushroom wellness is doing. I think so many people would just feel better so quickly. And it's as simple as, waking up in the morning and instead of putting that coffee in your tummy first thing, which I know so many people, including people in my family, I just want my coffee first, have the green smoothie first. Deliver that good food. Your body's been waiting for it. You've been fasting while you've been sleeping. Break that fast with something that is a gift to your gut. Putting that in. I do mine with coconut water. I do spinach, celery, whatever leafy greens I've got around. I always throw an apple and an orange in there because I'm sharing it with Craig and he needs it to have a little more flavor than just the greens. I put in some frozen fruit. Today it was pineapple. I put my protein powder as well. I'll even put some collagen. And then I am really after the soluble fiber these days. So I'll put in like some chia seeds in there. And then I put a big scoop of mushrooms for us in there. And that being the first thing on the gut, the bloating is gone. The gas is gone. The constipation is gone. And definitely for me, my inflammation is managed. And it's just such a nice way to start the day for people that don't want to just go and eat all of these greens all the time. I can't get in 4 salads a day or 30 plants in a week. That's never happening for me. Just get it in the morning. Get it in that green smoothie in the morning, and then maybe have a salad with your lunch. Maybe put a couple of veggies and some sauteed shiitake on your plate at dinner at nighttime. But it just seems like such an easy thing to do to have affected all of these different things that are what we're complaining about. These are all of the symptoms.
Yeah, one thing too that I want to mention is you're taking coffee. We know that coffee is stimulating your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight nervous system. I'm not saying don't have caffeine. I very much
No,
love a cup of coffee or matcha or whatever. I love caffeine. There are benefits to it, and it's something that if you enjoy, keep doing that. It's just maybe changing up the time, right? If you're having a
hmm
green smoothie, your body's still in a parasympathetic state. It's called rest and digest. If you're staying in that parasympathetic state, you're helping with motility. You're helping your gut continue the movement. A lot of times people who are experiencing bloating and gas, it's just because they're backed up and the system is not continuing to go. They've stopped. And so helping feed the bacteria, giving it that soluble fiber that it needs, and insoluble fiber is great. And a simple thing that you can do in the morning is have a glass of water. Some people love to have a
yes,
liter. I like to have a liter with a pinch of salt, sometimes some
yeah,
lemon,
me too.
but you've just slept for however many hours. It's not common for
Hopefully
you.
7 to 9 hours.
Hopefully
Hopefully.
7 to 9 hours. Let's go err on the side of caution and say, let's say you only got 7 hours of sleep,
Yeah.
or maybe even less. Within 7 hours throughout the day, do you never have a sip of water? Because you definitely do, right? Like throughout the day, all of our hydration levels will vary, but your body is dehydrated. So giving it some hydration, giving it some water first thing in the morning, you're helping your gut motility, you're helping with your bloating, you're helping with some of your symptoms. These are little things that we've often gotten away from. We think
Yeah,
that health, and you and
absolutely.
I have talked about this a lot, Brandy, like, we're getting on our soapbox here, but I feel like it's these little changes that
Yes.
make a big difference, and adding functional mushrooms, you're just upgrading your
Yeah.
regular routine. They're not a fix. If you're eating fast food all the time and the standard American diet and drinking Coke instead of water or whatever, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but mushrooms won't be the fix for you. It's not like, a medication where, and
Well,
even then a medication is not a fix, but it's this different lens of health where everything we're doing is for our health and it's just living. And we
it's
oftentimes get
just
away
living.
from these things. It doesn't need to be complicated.
I love it. I love it. So let's leave our lovely listeners with these three things. Wake up in the morning, drink your water, get that hydration in. You're just plumbing. Today we're talking about the gastrointestinal
Yeah,
tract.
it's
You're
just
literally
plumbing.
from your mouth all the way down through your stomach into your gut, into your small intestine, your large intestine, all the way through that beautiful colon, all the way out the other end. You're just plumbing. And we know that plumbing in our house, it needs water to run through it to unclog those pipes. So get your water in, and probably more than you think you need. When we upped our water last fall, when we were doing 75 hard, we really saw the effects of, wow, we feel so great. It's just water. Number two, you have to move. So when you're getting up in the morning, consider that movement early on in the morning. Des and I, we were normally doing a 7:30 movement. We're not intense hit workouts. Sometimes we're just doing yoga, we're doing Pilates, sometimes we're going for a walk, sometimes we are lifting weights. It depends where the moon is for me. But moving your body stimulates that peristalsis. It gets us moving in the gastrointestinal tract as well as in all of the other systems of the body, and we've got to move. So we're too sedentary as a society. If you have gut health issues, drinking water and moving might be all you need. And then the last thing is this fiber question, getting more plants and fungi in your diet. Eat whatever you want. Diet, that word can be such a trigger. It does not have to be a trigger. Eat whatever makes you happy as long as you're including enough plants and fungi in that. Grab an apple, grab some nuts, grab some, put some oyster mushrooms in your air fryer and thank me later. One of our fungi friends brought us beautiful oyster mushrooms that she grew herself last week, 2 weeks ago. And I took them home and I tossed them a bit of avocado oil, put some salt and pepper on, and put in my air fryer. My mother in law thought I was giving her beef jerky. Seriously. That's how amazing they were. And I just watched her eating them, knowing what they were doing for her gut. So drink your water, get some movement, add more fiber to your diet, and enjoy feeling amazing when you do those things. We always like to end our podcast with a review from our community. Mine's really simple, and it's a review for the 4 mushroom blend, which is reishi, lion's mane, shiitake, and maitake. So we talked about lion's mane today. We talked about reishi today. You mentioned maitake in there today. All mushrooms that include high amounts of fungal beta glucans that are so great for as prebiotics, nourishing this healthy gut microbiome. So this review is from Nikki P from here in Canada, a 5-star review on the 4 mushroom blend. And it's a simple review. She says, I have been using a scoop of the 4 mushroom blend in my shakes each day and have noticed an improvement in both my gut response and my stress. But I just love how easy it is to use. And she's just saying more of what we're saying. You don't have to change what you're doing, just upgrade. Get those mushrooms into something that you're already eating that's making you feel great.
I love that. Mine is from Stephanie E in Canada on Protect Now, which is chaga, 5-star review. It's awesome. She goes, I'm still on my first bottle of chaga, but I've already noticed a huge difference in my gut health. Less bloating, gas, and inflammation. Love
Yay!
that. That's so
Love
great
that.
because so many people are experiencing bloating and experiencing gas and they feel inflamed. And to know that something is helping with all of those symptoms is pretty remarkable.
Pretty remarkable. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the Eversio Experience podcast. Please follow us here on the podcast. Subscribe if you're watching us where you can subscribe. Leave us a review. We'd appreciate it so much. And do reach out to us through email, on our website, through social media if you have any questions about what we've talked about or to recommend what you would like for us to talk about next. Until next time, be well, everyone.
Be well. Thank you.